He broke down in tears when he saw the school bill until the principal looked him in the eyes and whispered, "Your father saved my life." But what she didn't tell him? His own past was about to come back to change everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Jack Mercer slumped in his worn leather armchair, the only piece of furniture he'd kept from their old house. The evening light filtered weakly through the apartment's small window, casting long shadows across the cramped living room. His back ached from a long day of odd jobs, fixing Mrs. Henderson's leaky faucet, painting the Wilsons' fence, anything to make ends meet. But lately, it never seemed to be enough. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made him straighten up. Lily's key turned in the lock, and she pushed open the door, her backpack hanging heavily from one shoulder. Jack's heart lifted at the sight of her. She looked so much like her mother, with those same bright eyes and determined chin. "Hey, sweetheart," he called out, managing a smile. "How was school today?" Lily didn't answer right away. She stood in the doorway, clutching something in her hand, an envelope. Jack's smile faltered as he recognized the school's logo embossed on the corner. "Mrs. Watson gave this to me after class?" Lily said quietly, holding out the envelope. "She said it's important." Jack's hands felt heavy as he took it from her. The paper was thick and official looking, the kind that never brought good news. He opened it carefully, aware of Lily's eyes on him as he unfolded the letter inside. The words seemed to leap off the page. "Final notice. Immediate payment required." Below that, a number that made his stomach clench. 3 months of unpaid tuition, plus late fees. The threat was clear. Pay now, or Lily would be expelled. Jack's throat tightened. He'd been juggling bills for months, robbing Peter to pay Paul, always hoping the next job would be the one to get them ahead. But this was too much. The savings he'd scraped together wouldn't cover even half. "Dad?" Lily's voice wavered. "Is everything okay?" Jack looked up to find her watching him, worry creasing her young forehead. She was too perceptive for her own good, just like her mother had been. He tried to smooth out his expression to hide the panic rising in his chest. "It's just some paperwork from school," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Lily didn't move. She stood there, twisting the strap of her backpack. "Is it about the money again?" she asked softly. "I heard Mrs. Watson talking to the principal last week about families who haven't paid." The shame hit Jack like a physical blow. He'd promised himself that Lily would never have to worry about money, would never know the burden of adult problems. Yet here she was, carrying that weight anyway. "Come here, kiddo," he said, opening his arms. Lily came to him, settling into his lap like she used to when she was smaller. She still fit, but barely. She was growing so fast. Too fast. "I know things have been tight," he admitted, stroking her hair. "But we're gonna figure this out. We always do, right?" Lily nodded against his chest, but he could feel the tension in her small body. "Maybe," she hesitated. "Maybe I could help? Jenny's mom pays her to walk their dog, and Sarah makes money babysitting her little brother." Jack's heart clenched. His 10-year-old daughter shouldn't be thinking about ways to earn money. She should be focused on homework and friends and whatever book series she was currently obsessed with. "That's not your job," he said firmly. "Your job is to be a kid, to learn and grow and have fun. Let me handle the grown-up stuff." They sat in silence for a moment, the bill lying accusingly on the side table. Finally, Lily's stomach growled, breaking the tension. Jack managed a genuine laugh. "Sounds like somebody's hungry," he said, giving her a gentle push. "How about we make dinner? I think we've got everything for spaghetti." In the small kitchen, they fell into their familiar routine. Lily filled a pot with water while Jack dug out the pasta and sauce. As they worked side by side, Jack could almost pretend everything was normal, that they weren't one missed payment away from disaster. "Can you tell me about Mom?" Lily asked suddenly, as she carefully tore lettuce for a salad. "What would she do when things got hard?" Jack paused, a lump forming in his throat. Sarah had always known exactly what to do in a crisis. She'd been the organized one, the planner, the one who could stretch a dollar until it screamed. "Your mom," he said slowly, "was the strongest person I've ever known. She never let anything keep her down for long. When things got tough, she'd say, 'We've got each other, and that's what matters most.'" Lily nodded solemnly. "That's what we've got too, right, Dad?" "That's right, sweetheart." Jack squeezed her shoulder, swallowing hard. "That's exactly right." They ate their simple dinner at the small kitchen table, Lily chattering about her day, the science test she aced, the funny thing that happened at recess. Jack tried to focus on her words, to be present in the moment, but his eyes kept straying to the bill sitting on the counter. The numbers haunted him. 3 months of tuition, late fees, the deadline, circled in red. He'd promised Sarah he'd give Lily the best education possible, would keep her in the Christian school they'd chosen together. But now, Dad? Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Jack looked at his daughter's face, so young, yet so wise beyond her years. He wanted to tell her the truth, to share the burden somehow, but he couldn't, wouldn't. Of course we are, he said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. We're Mercers. We stick together, remember? Lily smiled, but there was something in her eyes that told him she wasn't entirely convinced. She was too smart not to see through his brave front. After dinner, Lily disappeared into her room to do homework, leaving Jack alone with the bill. He stared at it in the gathering darkness, running through options he'd already exhausted. Another loan? He'd been turned down by 3 banks already. Ask for help? His pride rebelled at the thought. Sell something? There was nothing left to sell. The paper trembled slightly in his hands as he read the words again, hoping somehow they'd changed. But they remained the same, black and white and final. Pay now, or Lily loses her place at school. The choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Jack sat hunched over his kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of crumpled papers and overdue bills that seemed to multiply in the harsh fluorescent light. The ancient desk lamp he'd borrowed from Lily's room cast a sickly yellow glow across the scattered documents, making the red final notice stamps appear even more ominous. His calculator clicked steadily, each monotonous beep accompanied by totals that grew more discouraging with every passing minute. There has to be a way, he muttered under his breath, running calloused fingers through disheveled hair that stuck up at odd angles. The stubble on his jaw caught the lamplight as he leaned closer to the numbers, as if proximity might somehow make them add up differently. He'd been calculating for hours now, trying desperately to squeeze blood from stone. The unpaid bills seemed to mock him from their Neat Stacks Electric Company, threatening disconnection, gas bill marked urgent, grocery receipts that reminded him of the growing gap between what Lily needed and what he could provide. And looming above them all, the crisp white school notice that had started this midnight accounting session. The numbers blurred together as his tired, bloodshot eyes struggled to maintain focus on figures that refused to cooperate. The microwave clock's green digits read 3:47 a.m., casting an eerie glow in the darkened kitchen. He should be sleeping. His body ached with exhaustion, but his mind raced like a hamster on a wheel, spinning through the same impossible scenarios. Maybe he could pick up more handyman jobs on weekends? Sell his beat-up truck? No, he needed that rust bucket for work, unreliable as it was. The fire department pension barely covered their modest rent, and the meager savings account that had once seemed adequate was now almost completely drained. The soft padding of bare feet on hardwood interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Lily appeared in the hallway doorway like a ghost, her small frame silhouetted against the dim glow of the nightlight. She stood there in her favorite flowered pajamas, the ones with tiny pink roses that were getting too small, but that she refused to give up rubbing her sleepy eyes with the backs of her hands. "Daddy, why are you still up?" Her voice carried that innocent concern that always made his heart clench with guilt. "Hey there, sweetheart." Jack forced his mouth into what he hoped passed for a reassuring smile, quickly shuffling papers to hide the worst of the bills. "Just some boring grown-up paperwork. You should be sleeping, kiddo." I heard the calculator beeping. It woke me up. She took a tentative step closer, her bare toes curling against the cold kitchen tile. "Is it about the school thing?" Jack's heart clenched tight in his chest, too perceptive for her own good, just like her mother had been. Sarah would have seen right through his weak attempts at hiding their troubles, too. "Don't you worry about any of that, okay?" He reached out and pulled her small, warm body close, breathing in the faint scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Everything's going to be just fine. Daddy's got it all figured out. Promise?" Her voice was muffled against his worn flannel shirt, but he could hear the uncertainty threading through her words. Promise. The word felt impossibly heavy on his tongue, like a stone he was forcing himself to swallow. "Now, back to bed with you, little miss." After tucking Lily back into her narrow bed and pulling her favorite quilt up to her chin, Jack returned to his makeshift office at the kitchen table. He continued his futile calculations until the first pale fingers of sunrise began to creep through the grimy window above the sink, casting long shadows across his desperate arithmetic. His phone rang sharply at exactly 7:15 a.m., the sound cutting through the morning quiet like a knife. Jack nearly jumped out of his skin, his hand automatically reaching for the device with the reflexes of a man who'd spent years answering emergency calls. "Hello?" His voice came out rough and gravelly from a sleepless night and too much coffee. "Mr. Mercer? This is Caroline Brooks, principal at St. Michael's Academy." Jack's stomach dropped like a stone into deep water. Of course they were calling about the payment. Probably wanted to discuss removal procedures, make sure he understood the timeline for Lily's expulsion. "Yes, Mrs. Brooks." He straightened his shoulders automatically, as if she could somehow see him through the phone line. "I wanted to discuss Lily's situation with you. I know you received our tuition notice yesterday, and I imagine it came as quite a shock." "Ma'am, I can explain," Jack started, preparing to launch into the speech he'd been rehearsing about temporary setbacks and payment plans. But her warm voice gently interrupted him. "Mr. Mercer, please understand that St. Michael's truly values every single one of our students. Lily is an absolutely wonderful child, and we very much want to help your family through this difficult time. Could you possibly come in this morning so we can discuss some options face to face?" Jack blinked hard, certain he'd misheard. "Options, ma'am?" "Yes, indeed. I have several ideas I'd like to share with you, and I think you'll find our conversation quite encouraging. Would 9 a.m. work with your schedule?" He quickly ran through his mental calendar just one afternoon repair job for old Mrs. Henderson's leaky faucet. "Yes, ma'am, I can be there." "Excellent, I'll see you then." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an odd note of warmth that confused him. "And Mr. Mercer, please don't spend another moment worrying. We're here to help, and we're going to figure this out together." After hanging up, Jack stared at the phone in his palm, as if it might suddenly sprout wings and fly away. Help? Private Christian schools weren't exactly known for their charity work, especially not towards struggling single fathers who couldn't make their payments. There had to be a catch, there always was. Maybe they wanted him to sign something, acknowledge the debt officially before they kicked Lily out. The sound of Lily's cheerful alarm clock drifted from her bedroom, playing the same tinny melody that had woken her every school day for the past 2 years. Jack quickly gathered his scattered papers, stuffing them hastily into the kitchen junk drawer where Lily wouldn't accidentally see the full extent of their financial mess. "Morning, Daddy!" Lily bounced into the kitchen like a ray of pure sunshine, already dressed in her crisp school uniform with her blonde ponytail pulled back neat and tidy, despite a few rebellious strands that had escaped to frame her face. "Morning, sunshine." Jack moved to the stove, grateful for the familiar routine of breakfast preparation. "How about scrambled eggs today? Did you sleep at all last night? Your eyes look really red and puffy." She studied his face with those perceptive blue eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "I'm fine, sweetheart." He cracked eggs into the pan with perhaps more force than strictly necessary. "Actually, I need to go meet with Mrs. Brooks this morning about some school stuff." Lily's face immediately fell, her bright expression clouding over like a storm moving in. "Is it about that notice thing?" "Yeah, but don't you worry one single bit about it." He flipped the eggs with unnecessary vigor, the spatula scraping against the old pan. "Daddy's gonna figure everything out, just like I promised." Mrs. Brooks is really nice, though. She always says good morning to me in the hallway, and sometimes she stops by our music class just to listen to us sing. Lily's voice brightened slightly, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as him. Jack managed to produce a small, genuine smile at that. "That does sound nice. It's good to know you have people at school who care about you." He served up the eggs alongside buttered toast, trying to ignore how the simple breakfast felt like a luxury given their current situation. During their quiet meal together, Jack found himself watching his daughter chatter excitedly about her upcoming history test on the American Revolution and the art project she was working on with watercolors. She seemed so genuinely happy at St. Michael's, so settled and secure in her little world of friendships and learning. The thought of having to pull her out of this place that clearly meant so much to her made his chest physically ache with a pain that had nothing to do with his old injury. After dropping Lily off at the familiar brick building with its cheerful yellow doors, Jack spent several minutes in his truck, adjusting his only decent tie and trying to make himself look presentable. The school hallways were blissfully quiet now, the morning chaos of arrival having settled into the steady, purposeful hum of learning and progress. He paused outside Mrs. Brooks's office door, catching sight of his reflection in the glass panel. Dark circles stood out starkly against his pale skin, and his tie sat slightly crooked despite his best efforts. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd spent the entire night worrying about money he didn't have and problems he couldn't solve. "Get it together, Mercer," he muttered under his breath, straightening his tie one final time and running his fingers through his hair. But doubt continued to gnaw at him like a persistent ache. What kind of help could they really offer that wouldn't come with strings attached? And more importantly, could he actually bring himself to accept it? His pride had already taken enough hits lately. How much more could it withstand? Lily needs this school, he reminded himself firmly, his hand hovering over the doorknob. For her sake, he'd swallow whatever remained of his pride and listen politely to whatever Mrs. Brooks had to say, even if, deep in his heart, he didn't believe there was really any way to fix this mess he'd made of their lives. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of St. Michael's Christian Academy, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Jack Mercer felt out of place in his worn work boots and faded jeans as he made his way to the principal's office. The hallways echoed with the distant sounds of children reciting lessons and singing hymns. The school secretary, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, looked up from her computer. "Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Brooks is expecting you. Go right in." Jack's calloused hand hesitated on the brass doorknob for a moment before he pushed it open. The office was warm and inviting, with potted plants on the windowsills and framed student artwork decorating the walls. Behind a large oak desk sat Caroline Brooks, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She stood to greet him, her smile genuine and welcoming. "Mr. Mercer, thank you for coming in this morning. Please, have a seat." She gestured to one of the comfortable chairs facing her desk. Jack lowered himself into the chair, his broad shoulders tense. "Mrs. Brooks, about Lily's tuition." She held up a hand, her expression gentle. "That's exactly why I asked you here today." She opened a folder on her desk, removing several papers. "I wanted to inform you personally that Lily's tuition has been paid in full for the remainder of the school year." Jack blinked, certain he had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The tuition has been taken care of," Caroline repeated, her voice soft but clear. "Every penny." Jack's throat tightened. He gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. "I don't understand. Is this some kind of scholarship? I haven't applied for anything." "No, Mr. Mercer, this isn't a scholarship." Caroline's eyes grew misty as she stood and walked around her desk. She perched on the edge, closer to Jack. "This is something I've wanted to do for a very long time." Confusion clouded Jack's features. "Mrs. Brooks, I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept charity. I'll find a way to pay." "This isn't charity, Mr. Mercer." Her voice quivered with emotion. "Your daughter saved my life." Jack's brow furrowed. "What? Lily? That's impossible. She's only not Lily," Caroline interrupted gently. You saved my life." The words hung in the air between them. Jack stared at her, searching her face for some kind of explanation. "It was 15 years ago," Caroline continued, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "There was a fire in an apartment building on Cedar Street. I was 17, trapped on the 3rd floor." Her voice grew thick with emotion. "The smoke was everywhere. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see. I thought I was going to die." Recognition slowly dawned in Jack's eyes as buried memories surfaced. The Cedar Street fire. It had been one of his most dangerous rescues. "You carried me out," Caroline said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I was unconscious by then, but I remember waking up in the hospital. The doctors told me a firefighter had found me just in time. They said another minute and..." She took a shaky breath. "That firefighter was you, Mr. Mercer." Jack sat back in his chair, stunned. He remembered that night, the intense heat, the thick smoke, the terrified teenager he'd found huddled in a corner, but he'd never known what happened to her after the ambulance drove away. "I tried to find you afterward," Caroline explained, "to thank you, but by then you'd been injured in another fire, and no one seemed to know where you'd gone." She smiled softly. "When Lily enrolled here last year, I saw your name on her paperwork. I could hardly believe it." Jack's voice was rough when he finally spoke. "I had no idea. All these months." "I wanted to tell you right away," Caroline admitted, "but I wasn't sure how. And then I learned about your situation, about everything you've been through." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Mercer, you gave me a second chance at life. Please, let me help give one to Lily." Jack's eyes burned as he stared at his hands. Pride warred with gratitude in his chest. "Mrs. Brooks, This is too much. The tuition, it must be thousands of dollars. It's nothing compared to what you gave me, Caroline returned to her chair behind the desk. That fire changed everything for me. It made me realize I wanted to dedicate my life to helping children, to making a difference the way you did for me. A heavy silence filled the office. Through the window, children's laughter drifted up from the playground below. Jack thought of Lily, of how much she loved this school, of how devastated she'd been at the thought of leaving. I don't know what to say. He finally managed. Say you'll accept, Caroline replied simply. Not for me, not even for yourself, for Lily. Jack drew a deep breath, his chest tight with emotion. After a long moment, he nodded once, unable to speak. Caroline smiled, relief evident in her features. Thank you, Mr. Mercer. And there's something else I'd like to discuss. But Jack was already standing, overwhelmed by the morning's revelations. I'm sorry, I need some air. This is all a lot to take in. Of course, Caroline said, understanding in her eyes. We can talk, more later. Jack moved toward the door on unsteady legs, his mind reeling. As he reached for the handle, Caroline's voice stopped him. Mr. Mercer, thank you for everything. He nodded again, unable to meet her gaze, and stepped out into the hallway. The morning sun still streamed through the windows, but now it seemed brighter somehow, more hopeful. Jack leaned against the wall, closed his eyes, and let out a shaky breath as 15 years of unknown history washed over him. Jack walked slowly along the cracked sidewalk, his shoulders heavy with the weight of Caroline Brooks's words. The afternoon sun warmed his face, but he barely noticed, lost in memories of that night years ago. Smoke, heat, flames licking at the walls, but her face? He couldn't place it. He rubbed his temple, trying to piece it together. There had been so many rescues during his time as a firefighter, so many faces blurred by smoke and adrenaline. The particular fire Caroline mentioned had been especially chaotic. A 3-story apartment building, flames everywhere. He remembered carrying someone down the ladder, but the details were hazy. How could I not remember? He muttered to himself, kicking a small stone along the path. The guilt gnawed at him, not just about forgetting Caroline, but about everything. Here was someone who'd made something of herself after nearly dying, while he could barely keep his daughter in school. When he picked up Lily from her classroom later that afternoon, her face lit up as always. Daddy, can we go to Thompson Park, please? She bounced on her toes, her backpack almost as big as she was. Mrs. Peterson said, we did great in music class today. Looking at her hopeful expression, Jack couldn't say no. Sure, sweetie, we can go for a little while. They walked hand in hand to the park, Lily chattering about her day. Jack tried to focus on her words, but his mind kept drifting back to Caroline's office. The way her eyes had welled up with tears when she told him how he'd saved her life, the genuine gratitude in her voice, and now she'd paid Lily's tuition, a debt he could never hope to repay. Thompson Park sprawled before them, its aging playground equipment and worn benches a stark contrast to the upscale neighborhood surrounding it. Lily ran ahead to the swings, her ponytail bouncing with each step. Jack settled onto a bench, his bad leg aching from the walk. He watched as Lily pumped her legs, swinging higher and higher. She was so much like her mother, same determined spirit, same gentle heart. Sarah would have known how to handle all this. She always knew what to do. A group of children played nearby, their expensive sneakers and designer clothes marking them as students from Lily's school. Their parents stood in a cluster, sharing jokes and making plans for weekend activities. Jack heard fragments of their conversation, talk of vacation homes and private tennis lessons. His chest tightened. This was the world Lily lived in now, thanks to Caroline's generosity. But he couldn't provide any of these things for her. No fancy clothes, no summer camps, no family vacations. He was barely keeping food on the table and a roof over their heads. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, but the beautiful view only heightened Jack's melancholy. He watched as Lily abandoned her swing and approached the group of children. They welcomed her easily enough, but Jack noticed how she tugged self-consciously at her second-hand clothes. One of the girls showed off a new tablet, and the others crowded around excitedly. Lily stood slightly apart, her hands clasped behind her back. Jack recognized that pose. It was the same one she used when looking at toys they couldn't afford in store windows. A boy in pristine white sneakers pointed to a sleek SUV pulling up. That's my mom. We're going to get ice cream before my piano lesson. Want to come? The other children eagerly gathered their things. But Lily shook her head. "I can't today," she said softly. "Maybe next time." Jack's heart cracked a little more. He knew she was saying no because she didn't want to make him feel bad about not being able to afford such simple pleasures. When had his 10-year-old daughter learned to be so careful with his feelings? He watched the other children pile into the SUV, their laughter floating across the playground. Lily waved goodbye, then slowly made her way back to the swings. She sat there quietly, dragging her feet in the dirt. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the park. Jack stared at the darkening sky, feeling the weight of his inadequacy press down on him. Caroline's words echoed in his mind. "You saved my life." Maybe he had, but right now, he couldn't even save himself. Jack sat at his small kitchen table, the laptop's dim screen casting a pale glow across his tired face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating before typing in his bank account login. The numbers that appeared made his stomach clench, barely enough for next week's groceries, let alone any extras. He closed his eyes, remembering simpler times when his firefighter salary had been steady and reliable. The injury that forced his early retirement still ached sometimes, a constant reminder of everything he'd lost. The medical bills had drained their savings, and then Sarah's cancer treatments. The doorbell's sudden chime startled him from his dark thoughts. Through the window, he could see the fading light of dusk, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Who would be visiting at this hour? He opened the door to find Caroline Brooks standing there, her professional attire somehow making him more aware of his worn jeans and faded t-shirt. She smiled warmly, though there was something tentative in her expression. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything?" "No, not at all." Jack stepped back, awkwardly gesturing toward the living room. "Would you? I'd like to come in." Caroline nodded, stepping into the modest apartment. Her eyes took in the neat but sparse furnishings, the second-hand couch, the small TV, the carefully arranged family photos on the wall. Jack felt his cheeks warm, knowing she must be comparing it to her own home. "I'll get straight to the point," Caroline said, settling onto the edge of the couch. "We have an opening at the school that I think might interest you." Jack's eyebrows rose. "An opening?" "Yes, our groundskeeper, Mr. Peterson, is retiring next week. We need someone who can maintain the grounds, handle basic repairs, that sort of thing." She clasped her hands in her lap. "I thought of you immediately." Jack's first instinct was to refuse. The idea of working at Lily's school, where other parents might see him doing manual labor? His pride rebelled at the thought, but then he remembered the bank balance glowing on his laptop screen. "I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Brooks, but the pay isn't extraordinary," she continued, as if she hadn't heard his beginning protest. "But it includes health insurance and other benefits. And the hours would align with Lily's school schedule." Jack ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. The practical part of him knew he couldn't afford to turn down steady work. The proud part of him wanted to maintain some dignity in front of his daughter's classmates. "I don't want charity," he said finally, his voice rough. Caroline's expression sharpened. "This isn't charity, Mr. Mercer. We genuinely need someone with your skills. You have experience with maintenance from your firefighting days, don't you? And you're clearly capable and hardworking." He nodded slowly, remembering the countless hours he'd spent maintaining equipment at the firehouse. "Yes, but then you're qualified." She leaned forward slightly. "Listen, Jack, I understand your hesitation, but sometimes accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." The words hit home, reminding him of something Sarah used to say. His late wife had always been better at accepting help than he was. He glanced at her photo on the wall, wondering what she would tell him to do now. "When would you need me to start?" he asked finally. Relief flickered across Caroline's face. "Tomorrow morning, if possible. Mr. Peterson can show you around before he leaves." Jack nodded, his throat tight. "What time?" 7:30? She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I'll have all the paperwork ready for you to sign." As she moved toward the door, Jack followed, his emotions a tangled mess of gratitude and embarrassment. This woman he'd apparently saved years ago was now throwing him a lifeline, and he couldn't decide whether to feel thankful or humiliated. "Mrs. Brooks," he said as she reached for the doorknob. Thank you." She turned back, her eyes kind. "You're welcome, Mr. Mercer. I'll see you in the morning." After she left, Jack stood in the quiet apartment, letting reality sink in. He was going to be the school groundskeeper. The thought made him wince, imagining the whispers from other parents, the pitying looks. But when he glanced at his laptop, still showing his nearly empty bank account, he knew he had no choice. He walked to Lily's room, peering in at his sleeping daughter. Her face was peaceful in the soft glow of her nightlight, one arm wrapped around the stuffed bear Sarah had given her. Looking at her, Jack felt his pride crack just a little more. If swallowing his pride meant keeping a roof over her head and food on the table, then that's what he would do. Tomorrow morning, he would become the school groundskeeper. It wasn't the life he'd imagined for himself, but for Lily, he would make it work. He had to. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the school grounds as Jack pulled into the parking lot. His old truck, with its faded paint and squeaky brakes, looked out of place among the shiny SUVs and luxury sedans. He parked in the far corner, away from the other vehicles, and took a deep breath. 7:25. He was early. The campus looked different at this hour, peaceful and quiet, without the usual bustle of students and parents. Jack grabbed his worn work gloves from the passenger seat and headed toward the maintenance shed where he was supposed to meet Mr. Peterson. The old groundskeeper was already there, organizing tools on a workbench. He barely looked up as Jack entered. "You must be Mercer. Start by cleaning the gutters on the east wing. Ladders outside. No small talk, just straight to business." Jack appreciated that. The work was straightforward enough, clearing leaves and debris from gutters, checking for damage, making minor repairs where needed. Physical labor felt good after months of scraping by on odd jobs. Up on the ladder, Jack could see across the school grounds, the neat playground, the basketball courts, and beyond them, a small garden area where splashes of color hinted at early spring flowers. As the morning wore on, parents began arriving with their children. Jack kept his head down, focusing on his work, but he could feel curious glances directed his way. A few whispers reached his ears. "That's Lily Mercer's father, and did you hear about?" He gripped the ladder tighter and pretended not to notice. By mid-morning, the sun had grown warmer. Jack had moved on to fixing a loose handrail near the kindergarten entrance when he noticed an elderly man working in the garden he'd seen earlier. The man wore old jeans and a faded military veteran's cap, methodically pulling weeds and talking softly to the plants as he worked. Jack finished with the handrail and moved on to his next task, replacing some worn weather stripping on the gymnasium doors. As he worked, he became aware of footsteps approaching. "Those doors can be tricky." A gentle voice said, "They've given me trouble more than once." Jack looked up to find the elderly gardener standing nearby, leaning slightly, on a wooden cane. Despite his weathered face, his eyes were bright and kind. "Walter Thompson." The man introduced himself, extending a soil-stained hand. "I help tend the garden here. Volunteer work keeps these old bones moving." Jack shook his hand. Jack Mercer. "Ah, Lily's father." Walter's smile grew warmer. "She's quite the singer, your girl. I hear her practicing sometimes when she thinks no one's listening." Jack felt a flutter of pride, quickly followed by his usual worry. "She gets that from her mother." Walter nodded, settling himself on a nearby bench. "Lost my wife too, about 15 years ago now. Cancer's a cruel thing." The simple acknowledgement of shared pain made Jack's throat tighten. He focused on measuring the weather, stripping, trying to keep his hands steady. "You know," Walter continued, his voice thoughtful, "I lost everything once. Not just Martha, my job, my savings, my self-respect. Ended up living in my car for a while after I came back from Nam. Thought I'd never find my way back." Jack paused in his work, glancing at the older man. There was no pity in Walter's expression, just quiet understanding. "What changed?" Jack found himself asking. "Someone offered me a job I thought was beneath me." Walter chuckled softly. "Cleaning toilets at the VA hospital? I almost didn't take it. Pride's a heavy thing to carry when you're already weighed down." Jack's hands stilled on the doorframe. The parallel to his own situation wasn't lost on him. "But you took it," he said. "I did. And you know what? The morning air felt crisp as Jack walked across the school parking lot, his work boots crunching against the gravel. He carried his old leather lunchbox, the same one he'd used during his firefighting days. The familiar weight brought both comfort and a twinge of sadness. Parents were dropping off their children, expensive cars gleaming in the morning light. Jack kept his head down, focusing on reaching the maintenance shed where his day would begin. As he passed a group of well-dressed mothers, their conversation suddenly hushed. "That's him," one whispered, not quite quietly enough. "The new groundskeeper. I heard Mrs. Brooks hired him because his daughter couldn't afford. Another began before being shushed by her friend. Jack's shoulders tensed, but he kept walking. The words, "charity case," floated behind him, sharp as needles. His cheeks burned, but he refused to show it affected him. He'd faced burning buildings. He could face this. Inside the maintenance shed, Jack busied himself with the day's tasks. The lawn needed mowing, the hedges needed trimming, and several classroom windows needed cleaning. Physical work? This he understood. This he could handle. Throughout the morning, he caught glimpses of Lily during recess. She was different here, more alive somehow. He watched from a distance as she participated in class discussions through the windows, her hand shooting up eagerly. During lunch break, she sat with a small group of girls, sharing laughs over their sandwiches. Mrs. Brooks appeared beside him as he worked on fixing a broken swing. "Your daughter has quite a gift for literature," she said warmly. Her interpretation of Bridge to Terabithia brought tears to my eyes. Jack's chest swelled with pride, even as another parent walking past gave him a look that made him feel 2 inches tall. "She gets that from her mother," he managed, tightening a bolt with perhaps more force than necessary. "We're starting a special creative writing program," Caroline continued. "I'd love for Lily to join. She has such a beautiful way with words." Before Jack could respond, 2 mothers walked past, their designer handbags swinging. One glanced at him and whispered to her friend, "I suppose we have to accept everyone these days. The school standards." Caroline's face darkened, but Jack shook his head slightly. "Don't," he said quietly. "Please, it'll only make it worse." The rest of the men? They passed in a blur of manual labor and stolen moments watching Lily thrive. He saw her in the library with Mrs. Brooks, their heads bent over a book together. He glimpsed her in music class, singing with pure joy. Each sight filled him with equal measures of pride and pain. The whispers continued. In the afternoon, as he cleaned the windows of the teacher's lounge, he overheard a group of parents discussing the upcoming charity fundraiser. "Well, now we know where our donations are going," one said with a laugh. "To subsidize the pity projects." Jack's hand tightened on the squeegee until his knuckles turned white. He thought of Lily's smile that morning, of how she'd hugged him before running to class. Keep going, he told himself. For her. When the final bell rang, Jack waited by the maintenance shed until most of the other parents had left. Lily bounded up to him, her backpack bouncing, her face glowing with excitement. "Daddy, Mrs. Brooks says I can join the writing club. And guess what? We're studying poetry next week, and she thinks I might be good at it." Jack forced a smile, pushing aside the day's hurts. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your mom would be so proud." The drive home was quiet, Lily humming softly to herself as she reviewed her homework. Their small apartment felt especially modest after spending the day at the prestigious school, but Jack had always worked to make it feel like home. They sat at their small kitchen table, sharing a simple dinner of spaghetti and meatballs. The sauce came from a jar, not homemade like the meals the other parents probably served, but Lily didn't seem to mind. "Are you happy at school, sweetie?" Jack asked, twirling pasta around his fork. Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Mrs. Brooks let me borrow extra books from the library, and Sarah invited me to her study group." Jack watched his daughter's animated face as she chatted about her day. The whispers and judgmental glances seemed to fade slightly in the warm light of their kitchen, in the face of her innocent joy. "Everything's going to be okay," he said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "We're going to be just fine." Lily squeezed back, her small fingers warm against his calloused palm. "I know, Daddy." "We always are when we're together." Jack swallowed hard, fighting back the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. The day's indignities still stung, but here, in this moment with his daughter, he found a small measure of peace. Tomorrow would bring more whispers, more sideways glances, more pride to swallow. But for now, in their humble kitchen, with the mismatched chairs and the slightly chipped plates, they had each other. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The rain pounded against Jack's bedroom window all night, each drop like a hammer against glass. He tossed and turned, worried about the leaky roof and whether his old patches would hold. At 5 a.m., his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Caroline's name flashed on the screen. "Jack?" Her voice was tense. "I hate to ask this, but we need you at the school right away." "The storm, it's bad. The gymnasium is flooding." Jack sat up, already reaching for his work clothes. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He peeked into Lily's room, finding her sound asleep. Mrs. Martinez from next door had agreed to watch her in emergencies. After a quick call to arrange childcare, Jack grabbed his toolbox and headed out into the downpour. The scene at the school was chaos. Water pooled around the building's foundation, and a steady stream poured through the gymnasium's double doors. Caroline stood under an umbrella, directing a small group of early morning volunteers. "Thank goodness you're here," she said when she spotted Jack. "The drain system is backed up, and we've got the charity auction set up inside. Everything will be ruined if we can't stop this." Jack nodded, his old firefighter instincts kicking in. He'd seen this before urban flooding during major storms. "We need sandbags," he said, taking charge without thinking. "And pumps. Do we have access to any of those?" Caroline pointed to her office. "I made some calls. The hardware store is sending supplies." Within minutes, Jack organized the volunteers into teams. Some filled sandbags, while others formed a chain to move equipment out of harm's way. Walter showed up, soaked but determined to help. "Just like old times, eh?" the elderly veteran said, hefting a sandbag with surprising strength. Jack worked methodically, remembering his training. He directed people to create barriers, position pumps at strategic points, and used his knowledge of water flow to minimize damage. His voice carried over the storm's roar, calm and assured. Parents began arriving, drawn by emergency texts from Caroline. Among them were some of the same ones who'd whispered about him days before. Now, they watched as Jack waded through knee-deep water, securing valuable equipment and ensuring everyone stayed safe. "The electrical panel," Jack called out, pointing to a danger spot. "We need to shut it down before the water reaches it." He splashed through the flood, throwing the main breaker just in time. Hours passed in a blur of activity. The rain eventually slowed, and the pumps began winning their battle against the rising water. Jack's clothes were soaked through, his muscles aching, but he kept working. Around mid-morning, the sun finally broke through the clouds. The gymnasium floor was still wet, but the flooding had stopped. Volunteers mopped up what remained, while Jack checked the drainage system. "You saved us thousands in damage," Caroline said, bringing him a cup of hot coffee. "The charity auction can still happen tomorrow." Other parents gathered around, offering thanks and praise. Mrs. Thompson, who Jack had overheard calling him a charity case just days ago, touched his arm. "We're lucky to have you here," she said, genuine gratitude in her voice. Jack accepted their words with quiet nods, but inside, his emotions churned. The praise felt good, really good. For the first time since losing his firefighting career, he felt truly useful again. But as he looked around at these wealthy parents and their expensive rain gear, the gap between their worlds still felt massive. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his bank. Payment declined. Insufficient funds. The electric bill. He'd forgotten about it in all the chaos. Caroline must have noticed something in his expression. "Jack, are you all right?" He forced a smile. "Fine. Just tired." He turned back to his work, checking the pumps one final time. The morning's victory felt hollow as he remembered the stack of unpaid bills waiting at home. He'd saved the school thousands of dollars today, but he still couldn't keep his own lights on. Parents continued to mill about, planning cleanup efforts and discussing the upcoming auction. Jack listened to their casual mentions of catering and donations, each word a reminder of the different world they inhabited. Walter appeared beside him, reading his mood as always. "You did good today, son. Real good." Jack nodded, grateful for the old man's steady presence. He watched as the last of the water drained away, leaving behind a mess to clean, but a building intact. He'd protected something valuable today, just like in his firefighting days. That had to count for something. Caroline approached again, this time with a group of parent volunteers. "We'd love for you to attend the auction tomorrow," she said. "As our guest of honor." Jack shifted uncomfortably, remembering his empty bank account. "I appreciate the offer, but no buts," she insisted. "You made sure we still have an auction to attend. Please come." He looked at their hopeful faces, at Caroline's kind eyes, and found himself nodding despite his reservations. Maybe he could bring Lily. She'd like to see the event she'd helped save. As the morning crowd began to disperse, Jack surveyed the gymnasium one. Last time, the floor would need refinishing, but the structure was sound. He'd done that. His knowledge, his experience, it had mattered today. But as he gathered his tools to leave, the weight of his personal struggles settled back onto his shoulders. One good morning couldn't erase months of financial hardship. He'd saved the school's charity auction, but he still couldn't save himself. The gymnasium floor glistened with puddles, reflecting the emergency lights overhead. Jack stood near the entrance, his clothes still damp from hours of work. The immediate crisis had passed. Sandbags lined the doors, pumps hummed steadily, and volunteers moved about with mops and squeegees. Caroline approached him, her usually neat appearance somewhat disheveled from the morning's chaos. "Jack, I can't thank you enough. Without your quick thinking with those pumps and organizing everyone," she shook her head, relief evident in her expression, "we would have lost so much more than just the floor." "Anyone would have done the same," Jack said, shifting uncomfortably at the praise. He ran a hand through his wet hair, leaving it standing in spikes. Caroline reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. "The school board approved an emergency bonus for your help today. You more than earned it." Jack's throat tightened as he looked at the envelope. The money would help, God knew they needed it, but something inside him couldn't accept it. "I appreciate the gesture, Mrs. Brooks, but I was just doing my job." "Jack," Caroline's voice softened, "you went well beyond your job description today. You showed real leadership out there." He gently pushed the envelope back toward her. "Use it for the repairs, please." His voice was firm but kind. "I don't need special treatment." A group of parents who had helped with the cleanup walked past, nodding respectfully in Jack's direction. Mrs. Thompson, who Jack had overheard making comments about charity cases just days ago, stopped briefly. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "thank you for showing us what to do today. I would have been lost without your instructions." Jack nodded, surprised by the genuine warmth in her voice. As the parents left, he noticed a shift in how they looked at him, not with pity or judgment, but with something that felt more like respect. Throughout the day, more people approached him for advice about dealing with water damage in their own homes. Jack found himself explaining simple maintenance tips, drawing from his years of experience. It felt good to be useful, to share knowledge that others valued. During lunch break, Walter appeared with 2 thermoses of hot coffee. The elderly gardener's eyes twinkled as he handed one to Jack. They sat together on a dry patch of concrete outside the gymnasium. "You're making quite a name for yourself," Walter observed, blowing steam from his coffee. Jack stared into his thermos. "I'm just trying to do right by Lily, keep her in school. Sometimes doing right by others means letting them do right by you too," Walter said quietly. "Pride's a funny thing, can hold you up or hold you back." The afternoon passed quickly as Jack supervised the final cleanup efforts. Parents who had previously avoided eye contact now engaged him in conversation. Their children waved to him as they passed, and a few even stopped to tell him how much they liked having Lily in their class. When the workday finally ended, Jack's muscles ached, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that came from honest work and making a difference. He gathered his things from the maintenance closet, surprised to find a few thank you notes tucked under his jacket. At home, Lily sat at their small kitchen table, homework spread out before her. Her face lit up when Jack walked in. "Daddy, is it true you saved the gym today?" Jack smiled, hanging up his still damp jacket. "I just helped out where I could, sweetheart. How was your day?" Lily bounced in her chair, eager to share. "It was amazing. Miss Wilson let me help lead the reading group today, and during music class, she said, 'I have a really good voice.'" Her eyes shone with excitement. "She's so nice to me, Daddy. She never makes me feel different from the other kids." Jack's heart swelled as he listened to his daughter chatter about her day. He began preparing their simple dinner, mac and cheese with hot dogs, while Lily continued her story. "And Mrs. Brooks came to our class today?" Lily added, organizing her papers. "She asked me to sing a solo at the upcoming school assembly. Can I do it, Daddy? Please?" Jack paused, wooden spoon in hand. "Of course you can, sweetheart, if that's what you want." "It is," Lily beamed. "Mrs. Brooks said, I have a special gift. She says everyone has something special to share with others." She looked thoughtful for a moment. "Just like you shared your special firefighter knowledge today to help save the school." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He turned back to the stove, stirring the pasta with more focus than necessary. Despite their struggles, despite everything they'd lost, his daughter was happy here. She was thriving. Maybe accepting help wasn't just about him after all. "My teacher says we're all part of a family at school." Lily continued, putting away her books. "She says families help each other, and that's what makes them strong." Jack served their dinner, watching as Lily dug in with enthusiasm. The mac and cheese might not be fancy, but tonight it tasted better somehow. As they ate, Lily hummed the song she would perform at the assembly, and Jack found himself smiling more easily than he had in weeks. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees lining the school's parking lot as Jack waited by his old pickup truck. He checked his watch, still grimy from the morning's work in the gardens. The school bell rang, and soon children streamed out of the building like confetti thrown to the wind. Lily burst through the double doors, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she ran toward him. Her face glowed with excitement, a sight that made Jack's heart swell. It had been too long since he'd seen that kind of pure joy in her eyes. "Daddy, Daddy!" She crashed into him with a hug that nearly knocked him back. "You'll never guess what happened today." Jack steadied himself, chuckling at her enthusiasm. "Well, with that much excitement, it must be something pretty special. Mrs. Brooks came to our music class today," Lily said, practically bouncing on her toes. "We were singing Amazing Grace, and she stopped everything to listen to me." Jack helped her into the truck, his movements careful as he dealt with the stubborn passenger door. "Did she now?" "She said, I have a special gift," Lily continued, her words tumbling out faster than she could catch her breath. "And guess what? She wants me to sing in the Christmas recital, a solo." Jack slid behind the wheel, his hand pausing on the key. A solo performance meant spotlight, attention, things they'd been trying to avoid since their financial struggles began. That's quite an honor, sweetheart. Mrs. Brooks is waiting to talk to you about it," Lily added, her eyes pleading. "Please, can we go see her? Please?" Jack glanced at his watch again. He'd planned to finish mulching the flower beds before heading home, but the hope in Lily's eyes made his hesitation melt away. "All right, let's go see what this is all about." They found Caroline in her office, sorting through papers from the morning's flood crisis. She looked up as they entered, her face brightening. "Jack, Lily, I'm so glad you stopped by." "Lily tells me you have something in mind for her," Jack said, trying to keep his tone neutral despite his concerns. Caroline set aside her papers and gestured for them to sit. "Your daughter has an extraordinary gift, Jack. I was absolutely stunned when I heard her sing today. It's not just her voice, though. That's remarkable. It's the way she connects with the music, the emotion she brings to every note." Lily sat straighter in her chair, beaming with pride. Jack felt a familiar ache in his chest, the same one he got whenever someone praised his daughter, pride mixed with fear that he couldn't provide what she needed to nurture her talents. "The Christmas recital is our biggest event of the year," Caroline continued. "We raise money for our scholarship fund, and it brings the whole community together. I believe Lily could be the highlight of the show." Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That's a lot of pressure for a 10-year-old. "Daddy, I want to do it," Lily interjected. "I love singing. Mom always said I should share my voice." The mention of his late wife sent a familiar pang through Jack's heart. Sarah had always encouraged Lily's singing, even in her final days at the hospital. Caroline leaned forward, her voice gentle. "I understand your concerns, Jack, but this isn't just about the performance. We have a wonderful arts program here, and I'd like to see Lily involved in it. Voice lessons, choir. There are so many opportunities for her to grow." "Opportunities cost money," Jack said quietly, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "The school has resources for talented students," Caroline replied, her eyes kind but firm. "We invest in our children's gifts, Jack. All of them." Jack looked at his daughter, seeing the hope shining in her eyes. She looked so much like Sarah in that moment, the same determined set to her jaw, the same spark of passion when she talked about music. Could I at least think about it?" he asked. "Of course," Caroline nodded. "But don't think too long. We'll need to start preparations soon if Lily's going to participate." On the drive home, Lily hummed softly in the passenger seat, occasionally breaking into quiet verses of Amazing Grace. Jack listened, really listened, and felt his chest tighten. Caroline was right. There was something special in the way Lily sang, something that reminded him of church bells and summer mornings and Sarah's laugh. "You really want to do this, don't you?" he asked as they pulled into their apartment complex. "More than anything," Lily replied. "When I sing, it's like Mom is still here, listening, you know?" Jack parked the truck and turned to face his daughter. Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. He thought about all the times Sarah had sung Lily to sleep, all the impromptu concerts in their kitchen, all the joy music had brought to their home before everything changed. "Mrs. Brooks said I could practice during lunch break," Lily added hopefully. "And she said they have all the music already, so we wouldn't need to buy anything." Jack ran a hand through his hair, weighing his fears against his daughter's dreams. He thought about the whispers in the schoolyard, the stigma of being the charity case. But then he looked at Lily's face, so full of hope and possibility, and made his decision. "Okay," he said softly, "you can do the recital." Lily's squeal of delight filled the truck cab as she threw her arms around him. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." As they walked up to their apartment, Jack watched Lily skip ahead, already practicing her scales. His heart felt both lighter and heavier, proud of her courage, worried about what lay ahead, and grateful that, despite everything, his little girl could still find joy in something as pure as singing. Tomorrow, he'd talk to Caroline about the details, about making sure Lily wouldn't feel overwhelmed or exposed. But for now, he let himself enjoy the sound of his daughter's voice floating back to him on the evening air, carrying notes of hope and possibility. The envelope had an official bank logo in the corner. Jack's hands trembled as he pulled out the letter. He'd been dreading this moment for months, hoping somehow things would turn around before it came to this. The words "Notice of Foreclosure" jumped off the page, making his stomach twist into knots. He sank into his worn armchair, the same one where he used to read bedtime stories to Lily. The payment he'd missed last month had been the final straw. 3 months behind now, the bank wasn't willing to wait any longer. 30 days. That's all they had left in their home if he couldn't come up with the money. Jack ran his calloused hands through his hair, fighting back tears of frustration. The walls of the small living room seemed to close in around him. The next morning at school, Jack threw himself into his work with desperate energy. He trimmed hedges with sharp, angry movements, as if he could somehow cut away his problems along with the excess branches. "Something troubling you, son?" Walter's gentle voice broke through Jack's thoughts. The elderly veteran stood nearby, leaning on his garden rake, his kind eyes filled with concern. Jack straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead. He hadn't planned to tell anyone, but something in Walter's weathered face made the words spill out. "Got the foreclosure notice yesterday," Jack admitted, his voice rough. 30 days to come up with 3 months of payments, or we lose the house." He stabbed the hedge trimmer into the ground. "I've tried everything. Extra jobs, cutting expenses. I just can't catch up." Walter nodded slowly, setting his rake aside. He gestured to a nearby bench. "Let's sit a spell." They settled onto the wooden bench, surrounded by Walter's carefully tended flower beds. The sweet scent of roses filled the air. "You know," Walter began, "back in '82, I lost everything. My business, my savings, my house, all gone in 6 months." He pulled off his gardening gloves, revealing hands marked by years of hard work. "Thought it was the end of my world." Jack looked at the older man with surprise. Walter always seemed so peaceful, so content. It was hard to imagine him brought low by circumstances. "What did you do?" Jack asked. "First thing I did was exactly what you're doing now. Tried to handle it all myself." Walter's eyes grew distant with memory. "Pride's a heavy burden to carry alone, son. Nearly crushed me." He paused, watching a butterfly land on a nearby flower. "But then, something happened. I finally broke down and told people I needed help. My church family, some old friends, they rallied around me. Didn't solve everything overnight, but it gave me breathing room to find my feet again." Jack shook his head. "I can't ask for help, not with this. I'm already taking charity from the school. And now?" His voice caught. "What kind of father can't even keep a roof over his daughter's head?" "A human one?" Walter replied simply. "You know what I see when I look at you, Jack? A man who'd move mountains for his little girl. But sometimes the mountain's too big for one pair of hands." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the school children play during recess. Lily's laugh carried across the playground as she jumped rope with her friends. "I failed her," Jack whispered. "Failed my wife too. Sarah always believed in me, said I could handle anything. But look at me now. Can't even make ends meet with a steady job." Walter's voice grew firm. "Now you listen here. That little girl over there doesn't need a perfect father. She needs you, exactly as you are, doing your best every day. And from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what you're doing." Jack struggled to swallow past the lump in his throat. "But how do I tell her we might lose our home? The only place she has left with memories of her mother? One day at a time, son. One day at a time." Walter patted Jack's shoulder. "And remember, you're not alone in this fight." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Jack walked through the quiet streets of their neighborhood. The autumn air had turned crisp, and leaves crunched under his feet. Each house he passed seemed to mock him with its warmth and security, everything he was about to lose. He found himself at the small park where he used to push Lily on the swings. The empty playground equipment cast long shadows in the streetlights. Jack sat heavily on a bench, the weight of his situation pressing down on his shoulders. Every morning, he put on a brave face for Lily. He smiled through breakfast, asked about her homework, and pretended everything was fine. Jack sat at his small kitchen table early the next morning, staring at the plain white envelope that had arrived in yesterday's mail. No return address, just his name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a bank statement showing that someone had made a substantial payment toward his mortgage debt, enough to cover 2 months of payments. His hand shook as he read the accompanying note for what must have been the 100th time, from someone who believes in second chances. "You're not alone." The coffee in his mug had gone cold, forgotten as his mind raced through possibilities. Who could have done this? The amount was significant, more than most people he knew could afford to give away. His first thought was Caroline, but surely she had already done more than enough with Lily's tuition. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching dust motes in its beam. In the next room, he could hear Lily getting ready for school, humming softly to herself as she packed her backpack. The sound made his heart ache with gratitude and uncertainty. Later that morning, Jack walked through the school grounds, mechanically going through his maintenance tasks while his mind churned. The mystery gift had given him breathing room, but he still faced losing everything if he couldn't find a long-term solution. He found himself near the administration building, pausing in his work. Through the window, he could see Caroline at her desk, focused on some paperwork. Before he could talk himself out of it, he walked to her office door and knocked. "Come in," Caroline called out. She looked up from her desk, her expression warming when she saw him. "Jack, what can I do for you?" Jack stepped inside, clutching his work cap in his hands. The office was neat and welcoming, with children's artwork decorating the walls. I need to talk to you about something." Caroline gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Of course. Please, sit down." Jack settled into the chair, feeling awkward in his work clothes amid the professional setting. "I've been trying to handle everything on my own," he began, his voice rough. "But I'm in trouble, Mrs. Brooks, real trouble." "Please, call me Caroline," she said gently. "And whatever it is, we can figure it out together." The kindness in her voice nearly undid him. Jack took a deep breath, forcing himself to continue. "The bank, they're foreclosing on our house. I got behind on payments after Sarah's medical bills, and I just couldn't catch up." Caroline's face showed genuine concern. "Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry. When did you receive the notice?" "A few days ago." "They're giving us 30 days. He paused, then added, "Someone made an anonymous payment to the bank yesterday. It helped, but you're still worried about the long term," Caroline finished for him. Her expression was sympathetic, but gave nothing away. Jack nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know who would do something like that. It's a lot of money." "Perhaps someone who knows your worth," Caroline suggested quietly. "Someone who understands what it means to be given a second chance." "I can't keep accepting charity," Jack protested. "It's not right." Caroline leaned forward, her eyes intent. "Jack, do you remember what you said to me that night of the fire, when I was terrified and couldn't move?" Jack shook his head. The memory was hazy, overlaid with smoke and fear. "You said, 'Trust me. We're going to get through this together.'" Caroline's voice was soft but firm. "That's what community means, Jack. That's what faith means. Sometimes we're the ones reaching out to help, and sometimes we're the ones who need to take the offered hand." Jack felt tears prick at his eyes and blinked them away. "I just want to do right by Lily, give her the life Sarah would have wanted for her." "And you are," Caroline assured him. "By being here, by working hard, by showing her what real strength looks like, including the strength to accept help when it's needed." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside the window, children's laughter drifted up from the playground. Jack thought about Lily out there somewhere, safe and happy, surrounded by friends. "I don't know what to do next," he admitted finally. Caroline smiled warmly. "Well, that's something we can work on together. I have some ideas about additional work opportunities here at the school. And I know some people in the community who might be able to help with financial planning." For the first time in weeks, Jack felt something loosen in his chest. It wasn't a solution, not yet, but it was a start. A small flame of hope flickered to life where there had only been darkness before. "Thank you," he said simply, standing up. "For everything. That's what friends are for, Jack," Caroline replied. "And you have more friends here than you realize." As he walked back out into the sunshine, Jack felt lighter somehow. The weight hadn't disappeared, but it felt more manageable knowing he wasn't carrying it alone. He looked up at the school building, solid and steady against the blue sky, and allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everything was lost after all. The wooden pews of the school auditorium creaked softly as Jack shifted in his seat. His collar felt too tight, and his palms were sweaty despite the cool air conditioning. He'd polished his old dress shoes until they gleamed and borrowed a tie from Walter for the occasion. The maroon fabric felt foreign against his throat, but tonight was special. Tonight was Lily's night. Parents and teachers filtered into the rows around him, their quiet chatter filling the space. Jack noticed a few familiar faces from his groundskeeping duties. Some offered polite nods, others warm smiles. The whispers of Charity Case seemed distant now, replaced by something that felt more like acceptance. Caroline Brooks appeared at his side, elegant in a navy dress. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the empty seat beside him. Jack nodded, grateful for the familiar presence. "Thanks for everything you've done for Lily," he said softly. "The extra music lessons, the encouragement. She's a special girl, Jack. She reminds me so much of myself at that age." Caroline's eyes grew distant for a moment. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. One by one, students took the stage, some playing instruments, others reciting poetry. Jack barely heard them. His heart thundered in his chest as he waited for Lily. When she finally stepped into the spotlight, Jack's breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple white dress that Caroline had helped pick out. Her dark hair pulled back with a ribbon, she looked so much like her mother that it made his chest ache. Lily's hands were clasped in front of her, but Jack could see no trace of nerves in her stance. She'd always been braver than him that way. The piano introduction began, soft and reverent, and Jack found himself holding his breath. Then Lily began to sing. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Her voice filled the auditorium, clear and pure as morning light. Jack had heard her practice countless times in their small apartment, but this was different. This was his daughter stepping into her own light, sharing her gift with the world. That saved a wretch like me. Tears welled in Jack's eyes as memories flooded back, teaching Lily to ride a bike, reading bedtime stories, holding her through nightmares after her mother passed. Through all the hardships, all the doubts, his daughter had somehow held on to this beautiful light inside her. I once was lost, but now am found. In the gentle swell of the music, Jack felt something shift inside him. The weight of failure, of constant worry, seemed to lift slightly from his shoulders. He thought of all the times he'd felt lost these past few years. Lost without his wife, lost without his career, lost in the struggle to provide for his daughter. Was blind, but now I see. Caroline reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. When Jack glanced at her, he saw tears in her eyes too. Around him, the audience sat transfixed, many dabbing at their eyes or simply sitting in reverent silence. Lily's voice soared through the verses, each note carrying hope and healing. Jack watched as his daughter, this amazing girl who'd been through so much, touched hearts with nothing but her voice and her spirit. As the final notes faded away, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the audience erupted in applause. Jack stood, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Lily's face broke into a radiant smile as she curtsied, her eyes finding his in the crowd. In that moment, watching his daughter beam with joy and pride, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not the temporary relief of a bill paid or a crisis averted, but real, soul-deep peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Lily stepped off the stage to continued applause, practically floating as she made her way to where Jack Saturday. He opened his arms, and she flew into them, burying her face in his shoulder. "Did I do okay, Daddy?" she whispered. Jack hugged her tighter, his voice rough with emotion. "You were perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Caroline Brooks's office, casting thin stripes of light across her oak desk. Jack sat in the familiar chair across from her, his work-worn hands folded in his lap. The smell of fresh coffee wafted from the mug Caroline had insisted on pouring for him, but he hadn't touched it yet. "Jack, I wanted to discuss something important with you," Caroline began, her voice warm but professional. She adjusted her reading glasses and pulled out a folder. "The school is planning our annual fundraising event for underprivileged children. It's one of our biggest events of the year." Jack nodded, wondering why she'd called him in. His job was maintaining the grounds, not planning fancy events. Given how well you handled the flood crisis in the gymnasium, I'd like you to help with the logistics of the event. Caroline continued, "We need someone who can coordinate the setup, manage the equipment, and ensure everything runs smoothly." Jack's throat tightened. He'd been happy to help during the flood. That was different. That was an emergency. This felt like charity wrapped in responsibility, and his pride bristled at the thought. "Mrs. Brooks?" He started, his voice rough. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm just the groundskeeper. Surely there are others more qualified." "Jack," Caroline interrupted gently, "you have experience managing crisis situations, coordinating teams, and solving problems under pressure. Those skills are exactly what we need." She leaned forward, her eyes meeting his. "This isn't about charity. This is about utilizing your abilities to help children who need it." The words hit home, but they also stung. Children who need it, like Lily, like him. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "The event raises money for scholarships," Caroline explained, seemingly sensing his internal struggle. "Last year, we helped 15 families afford tuition. This year, we're hoping to help even more." Jack's mind wandered to the other parents he'd overheard whispering in the hallways. Would they see him as even more of a charity case now? The poor groundskeeper trying to play event coordinator? "What exactly would you need me to do?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Caroline's face brightened. She pulled out a detailed list and began explaining the requirements. Coordinating with vendors, organizing the setup crew, managing the audio-visual equipment, ensuring safety protocols were in place. As she spoke, Jack couldn't help but notice how similar it was to managing a fire scene. Different stakes, but the same need for clear communication, quick thinking, and careful coordination. His old training kicked in as he mentally began breaking down the tasks into manageable pieces. "We'll need the gymnasium set up for at least 300 people," Caroline was saying. "The stage needs to be secure for the choir performance, and we'll need proper lighting for the electrical system in the gym won't handle that much draw," Jack interrupted, his professional instincts taking over. "We'll need to bring in additional power sources if you're planning stage lights and sound equipment." Caroline smiled, and Jack realized he'd already started problem solving. He felt his face flush. "That's exactly why we need you, Jack," she said softly. "You see things others might miss." Jack stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the school grounds he'd come to know so well over the past weeks. Students were filing into the building, their backpacks bouncing as they rushed to beat the morning bell. Somewhere among them was Lily, probably already in her classroom, safe and secure in a place she loved. He thought about the 15 families Caroline had mentioned, 15 children who might not have had the chance to be here otherwise, 15 stories like Lily's. "I'll do it," he said finally, turning back to face Caroline. "But I'll need complete access to the building plans and electrical layouts. And I want to inspect all the equipment myself before it's installed." Caroline beamed. "Of course, whatever you need." She handed him a thick folder. "Here's everything we have so far. The event is in 3 weeks. Jack took the folder, its weight feeling somehow heavier than it should. As he walked back to his maintenance office, he could feel the eyes of passing parents on him. Were they wondering what the groundskeeper was doing with an official school folder? Were they already gossiping about his new role? In his small office, Jack spread the papers across his workbench, pushing aside his regular maintenance schedules. The event plans were ambitious. Multiple performances, catering, audio-visual presentations, silent auctions. It was more than just a fundraiser, it was a celebration of the school's mission to help children in need. Children like Lily, children like him. His fingers traced the edge of the stage layout diagram. He knew he could do this. His years as a firefighter had taught him how to handle complex logistics under pressure. But a nagging voice in his head kept whispering, "You're not one of them. You're the charity case trying to play coordinator." Jack pulled out his old notebook and began making lists, focusing on the practical tasks ahead rather than the doubts swirling in his mind. He wrote down measurements, calculated power requirements, sketched alternative layout options. The familiar act of planning helped steady his hands, but couldn't quite silence the shame that lurked beneath his professional facade. This was his chance to give back to the school that had helped his daughter, but it also felt like a reminder of everything he couldn't provide on his own. Each note he wrote, each plan he made, carried the weight of his inadequacy. As the morning bell rang, Jack looked up from his work. Through his small window, he could see parents leaving in their expensive cars, heading off to their successful careers. Meanwhile, here he sat in his maintenance office, surrounded by tool racks and cleaning supplies, trying to pretend he belonged in their world. But he had given his word to Caroline, and if there was one thing Jack Mercer still had, it was his word. He would make this event work, even if every moment reminded him of his own failures. He owed it to Lily. He owed it to the 15 families who might get the same chance his daughter had been given. Jack picked up his pen and continued planning, pushing his pride aside one more time for the greater good. The school gymnasium buzzed with activity as volunteers scurried about, carrying boxes and setting up tables under Jack's careful direction. Morning light streamed through the high windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air. Jack stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, checking off items from his meticulously prepared list. The banner needs to go higher on the left side. He called out to 2 volunteers struggling with a large welcome sign. Here, let me help. He handed his clipboard to a nearby parent and strode over, his experience evident in his confident movements. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but this time it felt different, lighter somehow. This wasn't the crushing burden of unpaid bills or the gnawing worry about Lily's future. This was the kind of pressure he knew how to handle, the kind that reminded him of his firefighting days when people counted on him to take charge. "Mr. Mercer!" A young mother approached him with an armful of decorations. "Where should we set up the silent auction items?" Jack pointed to the far wall. "Along that side, please. We'll want to leave plenty of space for people to walk around and view everything." His voice carried the same steady authority he'd used during emergency situations, and people responded to it instinctively. Walter appeared at his side, pushing a cart loaded with potted plants from his garden. "Looking good, son," he said with an approving nod. "You've got everyone working like a well-oiled machine." Jack allowed himself a small smile. "Just trying to keep things organized." He glanced at his watch. 2 hours until the doors open. The gymnasium slowly transformed under Jack's supervision. Tables draped in white cloths formed neat rows, each one decorated with Walter's flowers. The stage stood ready for the evening's performances, including Lily's solo. Auction items were artfully arranged, and the refreshment area was stocked and spotless. Parents and teachers filtered in and out, following Jack's instructions without question. Even those who had once whispered about him being a charity case now sought his guidance, their earlier judgment forgotten in the face of his quiet competence. Caroline appeared periodically, watching from the sidelines with quiet satisfaction. She caught Jack's eye once and gave him a knowing smile, but she let him work without interference. This was his moment to shine, and she knew it. As the opening time approached, Jack gathered all the volunteers for a final briefing. "Remember your stations," he said, his voice clear and steady. "The silent auction tables need constant monitoring. Refreshments should be replenished before they run low. And most importantly," he paused, making eye contact with each person, "make our guests feel welcome. That's what tonight is all about." The doors opened exactly on time. People began streaming in, their excited chatter filling the space. Jack stationed himself near the entrance, greeting guests and directing them to various activities. He kept one eye on the overall operation, ready to step in if needed, but his careful planning paid off. Everything ran smoothly. The silent auction tables drew crowds. Children laughed as they played carnival-style games in one corner. The refreshment area stayed busy but organized. Even when a small punch spill threatened to become a crisis, Jack was there within seconds, directing the cleanup with calm efficiency. Through it all, he caught glimpses of Lily helping at the children's game station, her face glowing with pride as she worked alongside her classmates. She was no longer the scholarship student or the charity case. She was just another kid doing her part to help. Midway through the evening, the entertainment portion began. Various students performed, leading up to Lily's solo. Jack's heart swelled as he watched her take the stage, poised and confident. Her voice soared through amazing grace, and for a moment, the entire gymnasium fell silent in appreciation. As the evening wound down, Jack began coordinating the cleanup with the same precision he'd shown during setup. Volunteers moved efficiently, following his lead without question. The gymnasium slowly returned to order, though now it held the echo of success instead of the morning's nervous energy. While directing the last of the cleanup crews, Jack felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to find Caroline standing beside him, her eyes bright with emotion. "Jack," she said softly, drawing him slightly aside from the bustling activity, "I need to thank you." He shook his head, uncomfortable with praise. "I just did what needed to be done." "No." Caroline's voice was firm but gentle. This event wouldn't have succeeded without you. Your leadership, your attention to detail, your way with people, you made this happen. Jack stood silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. For the first time in years, he felt a familiar sensation, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, the knowledge that his efforts had made a real difference. It wasn't the adrenaline rush of running into a burning building, but it was something equally meaningful. The school raised more tonight than we have in any previous fundraiser, Caroline continued. That means more scholarships, more opportunities for children who need them. You did that, Jack. He looked around the gymnasium, taking in the nearly complete cleanup, the tired but satisfied volunteers, the evidence of a successful evening. Something tight in his chest began to loosen. A knot of self-doubt that had been there so long he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be without it. Thank you, he said simply, meaning it for more than just her words of praise. Caroline smiled, understanding in her eyes. No, Jack. Thank you. Jack's footsteps echoed in the empty stairwell of their apartment building as he climbed the steps, his body heavy with exhaustion from the long day. The fundraiser had been a remarkable success. Parents and community members had opened their hearts and wallets to help struggling families. Yet, despite the triumph, a nagging worry gnawed at his gut. He pulled out his keys, the metal catching the dim hallway light. The lock clicked, and he pushed open the door to find Lily curled up on their worn couch, a book open in her lap. Her face brightened at his arrival. "Daddy, how did it go?" She bounced up, her long brown hair swaying with the movement. "It went great, sweetie." Jack managed to smile, shrugging off his jacket. "Mrs. Brooks said we raised more money than expected." "That's awesome." Lily hugged him tight around the waist. "I knew you could do it." Jack's heart squeezed at her unwavering faith in him. "Thanks, Princess. Have you had dinner?" "Uh-huh. Mrs. Martinez from next door brought over some enchiladas." She pointed to a covered plate in the kitchen. "I saved you some." That was thoughtful of her. Jack's gaze fell on the stack of mail on the counter. His stomach twisted as he spotted an official-looking envelope from the bank. "Why don't you get ready for bed while I eat?" Lily nodded and disappeared into the bathroom. Jack waited until he heard the water running before reaching for the letter with trembling fingers. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the formal typeface. The words hit him like physical blows. "We regret to inform you. Loan application denied. Insufficient income. High risk." Jack sank into a kitchen chair, the paper crumpling in his grip. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing closer. They denied his last hope of keeping their home. In 30 days, they'd be out on the street. The sound of running water stopped. Jack quickly smoothed out the letter and tucked it into his pocket, forcing his face into a neutral expression. But when Lily emerged in her pajamas, she stopped short, her keen eyes studying him. "What's wrong, Daddy?" "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, just tired from the long day. Lily's lower lip trembled. "You're lying." "I saw the letter. It was from the bank, wasn't it?" Jack's heart sank. When had his little girl become so perceptive? "Come here, Lily." He patted his knee, and she climbed up like she used to when she was smaller. Sometimes grown-ups have to deal with difficult things. But that's not for you to worry about. "But we might lose our house, right?" Lily's voice quavered. "I heard you talking on the phone last week. You said we needed the loan or we'd lose everything." Jack closed his eyes, shame washing over him. He thought she'd been asleep during that late-night conversation. "Lily, listen to me. No matter what happens, we'll be okay. I promise you that." "But where will we go?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Will we have to live in your truck?" Jenny at school said homeless people sleep in their cars. "No, baby, no." Jack pulled her close, his own eyes burning. "We're not going to be homeless. We might have to move somewhere smaller, but we'll always have a roof over our heads." But Lily was crying in earnest now, her small body shaking. "I don't want to leave our home. I don't want to leave my school and Mrs. Brooks and all my friends." "Shh, shh." Jack rocked her gently, his heart breaking. "We'll figure something out. We always do, don't we?" Eventually, Lily's sobs subsided into hiccups. Jack carried her to bed, tucking her in with extra care. He sat beside her until her breathing evened out in sleep, then quietly left the room. In the kitchen, he pulled out the letter again, reading it over and over as if the words might somehow change. The enchiladas sat forgotten, growing cold on the counter. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the windows like nature's own tears. Hours later, Jack jolted awake in his recliner, unsure what had roused him. The apartment was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the curtains. Something felt wrong. He stood, his joints protesting, and walked to Lily's room to check on her. The bed was empty. Panic surged through him as he flipped on the light. Her backpack was gone, and her piggy bank sat empty on the dresser. A piece of paper lay on her pillow, covered in her careful child's handwriting. "Dear Daddy, don't worry. I'm going to help us save our home. I have $47 from my piggy bank. I'll find a way to make more money. Please don't be sad. Love, Lily." Jack stared at the note, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold it. Through the open window, rain continued to fall, and somewhere in that darkness, his little girl was out there alone. He rushed to the window, scanning the wet streets below. "Lily!" he called into the night, his voice breaking. "Lily!" Only the sound of rain answered. The night air bit at Jack's face as he ran through the darkened streets, his heart pounding against his ribs. Streetlights cast long shadows across the wet pavement, their glow reflecting off puddles from the earlier rain. His voice was growing hoarse from calling Lily's name. "Lily!" He cupped his hands around his mouth, scanning the empty playground where she loved to swing. Nothing but creaking chains in the wind. "Lily, please!" His phone buzzed Caroline. Any sign of her? Her voice carried the same worry he felt. Not at the school or the park. Jack's words came out between heavy breaths. "I've checked everywhere she might go. The police are helping look. Walter's driving around the south side of town." Jack ran his fingers through his hair, fighting back, tears of frustration and fear. Where would a scared 10-year-old girl go? Then it hit him something Lily had said last week when they drove past his old firehouse. "I think I know where she is," he said quickly. "The old Station 12. But that's been closed for years since the big fire." Exactly. Jack was already running, his feet carrying him through familiar streets. "She asked about it last week, about where I used to work." The abandoned firehouse stood like a ghost at the edge of town, its brick walls blackened by the same blaze that had ended his career. The windows were boarded up, and chain-link fence surrounded the property, warning signs posted every few feet. Jack's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as he approached. There was a small gap in the fence, just big enough for a child to squeeze through. His heart jumped when he spotted small footprints in the mud leading toward the building. "Lily?" His voice echoed off the empty walls. "Baby, are you in here?" A sniffle came from inside, followed by a small voice. "Daddy?" Jack pushed through the gap in the fence, ignoring the sharp edges that caught at his jacket. Following the sound of quiet crying, he made his way to the apparatus bay where the fire trucks used to park. There she was, huddled in a corner, her school backpack clutched to her chest. Her face was streaked with tears and dirt, but she was safe. Jack's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Oh, thank God." He rushed to her, dropping to his knees and pulling her into his arms. She buried her face in his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she hiccuped. "I just wanted to help. I thought maybe if I came here, I could find out how to be brave, like you were." Jack held her tighter, his own tears finally falling. "You don't have to be brave like that, sweetheart. You're already the bravest person I know. But we're gonna lose our house." Her voice cracked. "I heard you talking to the bank. I thought maybe, if I came here, I could figure out how to save us, like you used to save people." The words hit Jack like a physical blow. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, her mother's eyes, and saw the same determination he'd been carrying all these years. "Listen to me," he said, wiping her tears with his thumb. "You don't have to save us. That's my job. I'm your father, and no matter what happens with the house, we're going to be okay. You know why?" She shook her head. "Because we have each other, and that's worth more than any house." Headlights swept across the building's interior as a car pulled up outside. Caroline's voice called out, followed by Walter's. "Jack? Lily? We're here," Jack called back, standing with Lily in his arms. She was getting too big to carry, but right now, he needed to hold her as much as she needed to be held. They made their way out of the building, where Caroline and Walter waited by Caroline's car. Both rushed forward when they saw them. "Oh, thank heavens," Caroline breathed, reaching out to touch Lily's hand. "We were so worried about you, sweetheart." Walter placed a steadying hand on Jack's shoulder. "You both look like you could use a warm drink and a rest." Jack nodded, exhaustion finally catching up with him. The adrenaline that had kept him going was fading, leaving him drained. But as he looked down at his daughter's face, saw the trust and love in her eyes despite everything they'd been through, he felt something else too, a deep, aching gratitude that she was safe. "Let's go home," he said softly, knowing their problems weren't solved, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, having Lily safe in his arms was enough. Jack and Lily walked through their front door, both exhausted from the emotional night. Lily's face was still tear-stained, and Jack's shoulders sagged with the weight of everything. The living room lamp cast a warm glow over their modest apartment, making the worn furniture look softer in the dim light. A gentle knock at the door startled them both. Jack opened it to find Walter standing there, his weathered face creased with concern. He held a thermos in his wrinkled hands. "Thought you might need some hot chocolate," Walter said, his voice gentle. "I heard about what happened from Caroline." Jack stepped aside to let the older man in. Lily's eyes brightened at the sight of the thermos, and Walter poured 3 cups of steaming cocoa. The rich smell filled their small kitchen as they settled around the table. "You know," Walter began, watching Lily take careful sips of her drink, "I lost everything once too." His eyes held a distant look. "Back in '82, the bank took my house, my car, everything except my old army jacket and the clothes on my back." Lily looked up from her cup. "What did you do?" Walter smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Well, instead of running away from my problems, I decided to run toward something else, helping others." Jack watched as Walter pulled an old, creased photo from his wallet. It showed a younger version of himself standing in front of a homeless shelter. "I started volunteering there," Walter continued. "Didn't have much to give except my time and whatever skills I had. But you know what? Those were the richest days of my life." Jack shifted in his chair, his hands wrapped around the warm mug. "But how did you manage?" "The bills, the pressure." "The bills didn't go away," Walter admitted. "But something changed inside me. I stopped seeing myself as a failure and started seeing myself as someone who could make a difference, even with empty pockets." Lily reached across the table and touched the old photograph. "Is that why you help at our school now?" Walter nodded. "Exactly. And you know what happened? While I was busy helping others, people started helping me too, not because they pitied me, but because they saw value in what I was doing." Jack thought about Caroline, about how she'd helped them, not out of pity, but because of something he'd done years ago without even thinking about it. "You've got more than you realize, Jack," Walter said softly. "That school needs you. Those kids light up when you're around. And this little lady here?" He smiled at Lily. "She's got a gift that could bring joy to so many people." Lily ducked her head, but Jack could see her small smile. "The money troubles are real." Walter acknowledged, "I won't pretend they're not, but they're not the whole story. Sometimes the richest people I know are the ones who have the least in their bank accounts, but the most in their hearts." Jack remembered how it felt during the storm, when he'd helped save the gymnasium. How, for those few hours, he wasn't just the struggling single dad or the charity case. He was someone making a difference. "When I was at my lowest," Walter continued, "I thought I had nothing left to give. But that's when I learned the most valuable lesson of my life." He leaned forward, his eyes intent on Jack's. "Our worth isn't in what we have, son. It's in what we give. And you've got plenty to give." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their cocoa. Lily had curled up in her chair, her eyes growing heavy with exhaustion. "You know what helped me get back on my feet?" Walter asked, his voice quiet so as not to disturb the drowsy Lily. "I made a list every morning of what I could do that day to help someone else. Didn't matter how small it was. Could be helping an elderly neighbor with groceries or just listening to someone who needed to talk." Jack nodded, beginning to understand. He thought about his skills from his firefighting days, his knowledge of building maintenance, his ability to stay calm in a crisis. "Start there," Walter suggested, seeming to read Jack's thoughts. "Use what you know. The money situation, that'll sort itself out in time. But right now, focus on what you can do, not what you can't." As Walter stood to leave, he placed a firm hand on Jack's shoulder. "You're not alone in this, son. Remember that. And remember, sometimes the darkest times are just before the dawn." After Walter left, Jack sat at the kitchen table, looking at his sleeping daughter. For the first time in weeks, his mind wasn't racing with panic about bills and deadlines. Instead, he was thinking about what he could do tomorrow to make a difference, just like he used to do when he wore his firefighter's uniform. He pulled out a notepad and began to write, planning not just for survival, but for a life of purpose. The path ahead wasn't clear yet, but he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The phone rang early Monday morning. Jack sat at the kitchen table, his coffee growing cold as he stared at another pile of bills. His heart skipped when he saw the school's number on the caller ID. "Jack?" Caroline's voice was warm but urgent. "I need you to come to the school right away. We're having an emergency community meeting." Jack's stomach tightened. "Is everything okay? Is Lily?" "Lily's fine." Caroline assured him quickly. "Please, just come. It's important." 20 minutes later, Jack pulled into the school parking lot, surprised to see it nearly full. Parents' cars lined both sides of the street. His work boots scuffed against the pavement as he made his way to the gymnasium, where voices hummed behind closed doors. When he pushed them open, he stopped dead in his tracks. The gymnasium was packed. Parents, teachers, and even some students filled the rows of chairs. Walter stood near the front, his weathered face creased in a knowing smile. Caroline stood at the podium, her eyes finding Jack's immediately. "Mr. Mercer," she said into the microphone, "please join us." Jack's feet felt like lead as he walked down the center aisle. Whispers followed him, but they weren't the cruel ones he'd grown used to hearing. These were different, sympathetic, warm. "Many of you know Jack as our groundskeeper," Caroline began, her voice steady and clear. "But what you don't know is the real reason he's part of our community." She told them everything about the fire years ago, about how Jack had saved her life when she was just a teenager, how that act of courage had inspired her to dedicate her life to education and helping others. "Jack Mercer is not a charity case," she said firmly, her eyes scanning the crowd. "He's a hero who's fallen on hard times, and now it's our turn to help him." One by one, parents stood up to speak. The father whose daughter Jack had comforted during the storm, the mother whose car he'd helped fix in the parking lot. Even some of the children spoke about how kind Mr. Jack was to them. Mrs. Martinez, one of the wealthier parents who had once whispered about him, stood up with tears in her eyes. "My husband's construction company needs good workers," she said. "We'd be honored to offer you a position, Mr. Mercer. Full benefits, starting immediately." Walter hobbled to the front, leaning on his cane. "And you can have my old truck," he announced. "Been sitting in my garage collecting dust. Perfect for a handyman business on the weekends." The offers kept coming. Parents pledged donations to help with his mortgage. Teachers offered to tutor Lily for free. The school board promised to create a scholarship in Caroline's name, with Lily as its first recipient. Jack sat there, overwhelmed. His throat felt tight, and his vision blurred with unshed tears. All his life, he'd been the one helping others. He'd never learned how to accept help himself. Caroline touched his shoulder gently. "Sometimes," she said, just loud enough for him to hear, "the bravest thing we can do is let others be brave for us." A small hand slipped into his. Lily stood beside him, beaming. "See, Daddy? I told you we weren't alone." Jack squeezed her hand, unable to speak. The wall of pride he'd built around himself began to crumble, replaced by something warmer, something healing. The meeting continued, with parents organizing committees to help coordinate the assistance. Jack watched in amazement as these people, many of whom he'd felt judged by, came together with genuine concern and compassion. Mrs. Brooks had prepared a folder full of resources, financial advisors willing to work pro bono, legal aid to help with the mortgage situation, even counseling services if he wanted them. "This isn't charity, Jack," Caroline insisted when she handed him the folder. "This is community. This is what happens when people come together to help one of their own." For the first time in years, Jack felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. He looked around the gymnasium at all these faces, no longer strangers, but neighbors. People who saw his worth beyond his struggles. Walter shuffled over, keys jingling in his hand. "Come on, son," he said with a grin. "Let's go look at that truck of yours." Jack stood, his legs slightly shaky. Before following Walter, he turned to address the crowd. He began, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know what to say, except thank you, all of you." The room erupted in applause, not the polite kind, but the genuine, heartfelt kind that comes from real connection. As Jack walked out with Walter, Lily skipping ahead of them, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Not just hope for his financial situation, but hope in humanity. Hope in the power of community. Hope that sometimes, when you're at your lowest, people will surprise you with their capacity for kindness. His pride had kept him isolated for so long, convinced that accepting help meant admitting failure. But looking at these people, these neighbors who had come together for him and Lily, he realized that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply say yes to the helping hands extended your way. The manila envelope sat on Jack's doorstep, the morning sun casting long shadows across his front porch. He bent down to pick it up, noting the neat handwriting that spelled out his name and address. His fingers traced the return address, Caroline Brooks. Inside his small kitchen, Jack pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. The events of the past few weeks had left him emotionally drained. The community meeting yesterday had been overwhelming. So many people offering help, support, and encouragement. But the crushing weight of the mortgage still loomed over him. With tired fingers, he opened the envelope. Several papers slid out onto the worn kitchen table. His eyes scanned the first page, then froze. He read it again, his hands beginning to shake. It was the deed to his house, paid in full. Jack's breath caught in his throat. This had to be a mistake. He shuffled through the papers with trembling hands. Mortgage documents, transfer papers, everything signed and official. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note. Dear Jack, years ago, you gave me the greatest gift anyone could receive, a second chance at life. When my parents passed away last year, they left me their inheritance. I've been wondering how best to honor their memory, and now I know. This is my way of saying thank you for that night in the fire, for giving me the opportunity to live, to serve, to make a difference. Please don't try to refuse this gift. Consider it repayment of a debt long overdue. With deepest gratitude, Caroline. Jack sat back in his chair, the letter falling from his numb fingers. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the tears that had begun to roll down his cheeks. His house, the home where Lily had taken her first steps, where Sarah had spent her final days, was safe. He heard the soft padding of Lily's feet coming down the hallway. "Daddy?" she asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why are you crying?" Jack quickly wiped his eyes and managed to smile. "Come here, sweetheart." He pulled her onto his lap, just like he used to when she was smaller. Something amazing has happened. Before he could explain, there was a knock at the door. Jack opened it to find Caroline standing there, her usual professional demeanor softened by uncertainty. "I wanted to make sure you received the papers," she said quietly. Jack stood there, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, he found his voice. "Caroline, I can't accept this. It's too much." She shook her head firmly. "It's already done, Jack. The papers are filed." She stepped inside when he moved aside, greeting Lily with a warm smile. "But your inheritance," Jack started, "was meant to help someone who deserved it," Caroline finished. "My parents would have wanted this. They always taught me that true wealth lies in what we give to others." She paused, her eyes meeting Jack's. "Just like you gave me a chance at life that night in the fire." Lily looked between them, her eyes wide with understanding. "Is our house safe now, Daddy?" Jack looked at his daughter, tears welling up in his eyes again. "Yes, sweetheart, we're not going anywhere." He turned back to Caroline, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Caroline replied softly. "Years ago, when you ran into that burning building, you didn't know who I was, but you risked everything to save me. Now it's my turn to help you." Jack stood there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of her generosity. He looked at Lily, who was beaming with joy, then back at Caroline. Through tears, he whispered, "Thank you for everything." The morning light filled the small entryway, warming the space with golden hope. In that moment, Jack felt the weight of years of struggle begin to lift from his shoulders. His home was secure, his daughter was safe, and somehow, through all the darkness, grace had found its way back into their lives. The morning sun glinted off the faded blue paint of Walter's old Ford pickup truck. Jack ran his hand along its weathered side, feeling every dent and scratch that told stories of years of faithful service. Walter stood beside him, keys dangling from his wrinkled fingers. "She ain't much to look at," Walter said with a gentle smile, "but she's got plenty of life left in her. Just needs someone who'll put her to good use." Jack's throat tightened as he took the keys. "Walter, I can't accept this. It's too much." "Now, don't you start with that," Walter chuckled, patting the truck's hood. "Been sitting in my garage collecting dust since my arthritis got bad. Besides, what good's a handyman without proper wheels?" The truck's door creaked as Jack opened it, revealing a clean interior that smelled of pine air freshener. Walter had obviously spent time getting it ready. On the passenger seat lay a small toolbox, another gift from the old veteran. Got some basics in there to get you started, Walter explained. Figure between your skills and this old girl, you've got yourself the makings of a proper business. Jack climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the worn steering wheel. Through the windshield, he could see Lily bouncing excitedly on their front porch, waving at them. The sight made his heart swell. First thing we're gonna do, Jack said, is give her a good wash and maybe a fresh coat of paint. Walter's eyes twinkled. Sounds like a fine plan. You know, sometimes the best way to say thank you is just to make good use of what you're given. Over the next few weeks, Jack threw himself into establishing his handyman business. He started small, taking jobs from people at the school who'd heard about his work during the flood. Mrs. Peterson needed her fence fixed. Mr. Rodriguez had a leaky faucet. Each job, no matter how minor, Jack approached with the same dedication he'd once given to firefighting. The old truck proved invaluable. Its bed could carry lumber and tools, and its familiar rumble became a comfort as Jack drove between jobs. Lily insisted on helping him paint it, and they spent a sunny Saturday turning the faded blue into a cheerful navy, with Mercer Handyman Services carefully stenciled on the doors. Word spread quickly through the community. Jack's phone started ringing more often, and his calendar began filling up. The work wasn't always glamorous, fixing stuck windows, replacing damaged drywall, repairing wobbly chairs, but it felt honest, right. Caroline helped too, recommending him to parents at the school. Jack's not just handy, she'd tell them. He's trustworthy. The kind of person you want working in your home. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Jack sat at his kitchen table counting the week's earnings. Lily watched him from across the table, homework spread out before her. Are we going to be okay now, Daddy? She asked softly. Jack looked up, meeting his daughter's eyes. Yeah, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. And for the first time in a long while, he truly believed it. The stack of bills seemed less daunting now. They weren't rich by any means, but they were making it. More importantly, Jack had found his footing again. The next morning, Jack and Lily walked together toward the school, his newly painted truck parked proudly in the lot. The spring air was crisp and full of promise. Students rushed past them, calling out greetings to Lily, who now walked with her head held high. Look, Lily pointed to a robin building its nest in one of the trees Walter tended. It's starting fresh, just like us. Jack squeezed her hand, amazed at his daughter's wisdom. They stopped at the school entrance, where Caroline stood greeting students. She smiled warmly at them both. Good morning, Mr. Mercer, she said. I hear Mrs. Thompson was very pleased with the shelves you installed yesterday. Just doing my job, Jack replied, but he couldn't help feeling proud. As Lily hurried off to join her friends, Jack watched her go, remembering the desperate father he'd been just months ago. The weight of failure had been crushing then, but now he stood straight and tall. Walter appeared beside him, garden tools in hand. Beautiful morning for new beginnings, isn't it? Jack nodded, looking out over the schoolyard where Lily played. The morning sun painted everything in shades of hope, and for once, Jack didn't feel the need to guard against it. They walked together toward the garden, where spring flowers were starting to bloom. Jack had fixed the irrigation system last week, and the results were already showing in the bright bursts of color. You know, Walter said, bending to inspect a rosebush, sometimes the good Lord plants us right where we need to grow. Took me years to figure that out. Jack understood now what Walter meant. His place wasn't fighting fires anymore. It was here, building things, fixing what was broken, and watching his daughter thrive. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was becoming the life he needed. The school bell rang, and Jack headed toward his truck. He had 3 jobs lined up for the day, and he was ready for each one. As he walked, he caught sight of Lily through her classroom window. She was laughing with her friends, completely at ease. The sight warmed his heart. Together, they were building something new, not just a business, but a life. One repair, one day, one step at a time. The school auditorium hummed with quiet anticipation as parents and students filed into their seats. Evening light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden stage. Jack sat in the front row, his hands clasped together, heart beating with a familiar mixture of pride and nervousness. The past few months had changed everything. His new handyman business was steady, thanks to Walter's truck and the community's support. But more than that, he'd found something he thought he'd lost forever: peace. Caroline Brooks settled into the seat beside him, her familiar warm smile lighting up her face. She's going to be Wonderful, Jack. You should see her in rehearsals. Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He remembered the first time Lily had sung in this very auditorium, how scared and uncertain they both had been. Now, as the lights dimmed and the audience fell silent, he felt only gratitude. The curtain rose slowly, revealing a group of students arranged in neat rows on risers. Lily stood in the front, wearing a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. Her hands were clasped in front of her, just like his, a gesture that made him smile. She looked so much like her mother. The piano introduction began, soft and gentle. Jack recognized the song immediately, Bridge Over Troubled Water. His eyes welled up before Lily even began to sing. She'd chosen it herself, she'd told him, because it reminded her of him. When Lily's voice filled the auditorium, Jack felt his chest tighten with emotion. Her voice was stronger now, more confident, but it still held that pure, crystal-clear quality that could break hearts and mend them all at once. When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I'll dry them all. Jack watched as his daughter sang, her face serene, her presence commanding the stage without effort. She wasn't just singing, she was telling their story. Every word seemed to echo their journey, their struggles, their triumph. He thought about the nights he'd spent worrying about bills, about the shame he'd felt accepting help, about the fear of losing their home. But mostly, he thought about Lily's unwavering faith in him, even when he'd lost faith in himself. The chorus swelled, and Lily's voice soared above the other students. Jack noticed several parents dabbing at their eyes. Walter, sitting a few rows back, gave him a knowing nod. The old veteran had become like family, dropping by their house every Sunday for dinner, teaching Lily about gardening and sharing stories that made them both laugh until their sides hurt. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Caroline reached over and squeezed Jack's hand briefly. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. They both knew how far they'd come from that day in her office when she'd revealed their shared past. Now, watching Lily shine on stage, Jack understood that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as challenges. The song continued, and Jack found himself remembering the night Lily had run away to the old firehouse. How terrified he'd been, searching through the dark, calling her name. How she'd looked so small and frightened when he found her, convinced they were going to lose everything. But they hadn't lost everything. Instead, they'd gained something precious, a community, a support system, a new kind of family. The parents who had once whispered about charity cases now invited them to barbecues and birthday parties. Their house, saved by Caroline's generous gift, had become a gathering place for neighborhood children. Lily's voice grew stronger as she reached the final verse. She was looking directly at him now, her eyes bright with emotion but her voice steady and true. Jack saw in her face the same strength that had carried them through their darkest days. The final notes of the song hung in the air like a prayer. For a moment, complete silence filled the auditorium. Then, like a wave breaking, applause erupted from every corner. People stood, cheering and wiping away tears. Lily beamed, her smile radiant under the stage lights. She found Jack's eyes in the crowd, and in that moment, father and daughter shared a look of pure understanding. They had weathered the storm together. They had built something beautiful from their broken pieces. As the applause continued, Jack leaned forward in his seat, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "We made it, sweet girl," he whispered, watching his daughter take a graceful bow on stage. "We really made it." The words floated up through the applause, a quiet celebration of their journey. Lily straightened from her bow, still smiling, still strong, still singing their story of hope and redemption to anyone who needed to hear it. Jack stood in the schoolyard, his hands in his pockets, watching the autumn leaves dance across the empty playground. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the freshly cut grass he'd trimmed himself just that morning. The pride he felt in his work was different now, no longer tinged with shame or doubt. Caroline approached, her footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. She carried 2 steaming cups of coffee, offering one to Jack with a warm smile. "I thought you might need this," she said. "It's getting chilly out here." "Thank you," Jack replied, accepting the cup gratefully. The warmth spread through his hands as he took a careful sip. "You know, I used to hate coming here. Felt like every brick in this building was judging me." Caroline leaned against the nearby fence, her expression thoughtful. "And now?" "Now?" Jack glanced around at the school grounds. The garden Walter had helped him restore, the playground equipment he'd repaired, the fresh paint on the gymnasium doors. "Now it feels like home." You've made quite an impact here, Caroline said softly. The other parents ask for you by name when something needs fixing. Did you know that? Jack chuckled, shaking his head. Quite a change from the whispers about the charity case, isn't it? You were never a charity case, Jack. You were always so much more than that. Caroline's voice carried the weight of years of unspoken gratitude. Do you remember when I told you that you saved my life? How could I forget, though I still don't remember pulling you from that fire. That's because you were too busy doing your job, saving lives without keeping score. Caroline took a thoughtful sip of her coffee. But that day changed everything for me. It gave me purpose, showed me what real courage looks like. Jack shifted uncomfortably, still unused to praise. I was just doing what needed to be done. Exactly, just like you're doing now. Caroline gestured to the school around them. You're still saving lives, Jack. Every time you fix something broken, every time you show up early to help with events, every time you make a child feel safe, you're saving lives in a different way. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the wind stir the playground swings. I've been thinking about expanding the business, Jack said finally. Walter's truck has been a blessing, and word of mouth is bringing in more work than I can handle alone. Might need to hire some help. Caroline's face lit up. That's wonderful. Have you thought about who you might hire? There's this kid at the vocational school. Reminds me a lot of myself at that age. Eager to learn, needs a chance. Jack smiled. Figure it's time to pay it forward. You've come so far, Caroline observed. Remember when you wouldn't even accept help for yourself? Jack laughed softly. Yeah, pride's a funny thing. Sometimes it holds you up, sometimes it holds you back. He turned to face her fully. I never properly thanked you, Caroline, for everything. You don't need to. Yes, I do, Jack interrupted gently. Not just for the house, or Lily's tuition, or the job. Thank you for showing me that accepting help doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Caroline's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You taught me that first, Jack. 20 years ago, in that burning building. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone else be strong for us. The afternoon bell rang, and the sound of children's voices began to fill the hallways inside. Jack checked his watch. Lily's music practice should be finishing up soon. She's really flourishing in the choir, Caroline said. Mrs. Henderson says she's never seen a student with such natural talent. She gets that from her mother, Jack said softly. Sarah would be so proud of her. Sarah would be proud of both of you, Caroline corrected him. You've built something beautiful here, Jack. A life full of purpose and connection. Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words. We're not just surviving anymore, he said. We're living. Really living. The door to the music room opened, and Lily bounded out, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Her face lit up when she saw Jack waiting. Daddy! She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist in a tight hug. Mrs. Henderson says I get to sing the solo at the Christmas concert. Jack pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. That's amazing, sweetheart. I can't wait to hear it. Caroline smiled at them both. I should get back to my office. There's a school board meeting in 10 minutes. Thank you for the coffee, Jack said. And for everything else? Caroline nodded, understanding all that wasn't said. As she walked away, Jack held Lily tighter, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. Ready to head home, kiddo? Lily looked up at him, her eyes shining with excitement about her upcoming solo. Can we stop for ice cream first, please? Jack laughed, his heart full. You know what? I think we can manage that. Together, they walked across the schoolyard, their shadows stretching long behind them in the afternoon sunday. Jack felt the weight of his daughter's hand in his, the trust in her touch, and knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. I love you, Daddy, Lily said suddenly, squeezing his hand. Jack squeezed back, his voice thick with emotion. I love you too, sweetheart. Always will. The late afternoon sun painted the neighborhood in warm golden hues as Jack and Lily made their way down Cedar Street. Their shadows stretched long behind them, dancing on the sidewalk with each step. The ice cream shop visit had left a small chocolate smudge on Lily's chin, and Jack smiled at how she still ate ice cream with the same childlike abandon she always had. Did you see Mrs. Henderson's face when I hit that high note today? Lily asked, swinging their joined hands back and forth. She said I might be ready for more challenging pieces soon. I'm not surprised, Jack replied, his heart swelling with pride. You got your mother's voice, that's for sure. They passed old Mr. Johnson's house, where the elderly man was tending to his rose bushes. He straightened up and waved, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Hey there, Jack. Those gutters working better now?" "Like new, Mr. Johnson," Jack called back. "Let me know if you need anything else fixed." As they continued walking, Jack marveled at how different everything felt now. The same streets he'd once walked with his head down, weighted by shame and worry, now felt welcoming. Neighbors who had once been strangers were now friendly faces, each with their own story, each part of the tapestry of their lives. "Daddy," Lily said, her voice thoughtful, "remember when we used to worry about having enough money for groceries?" Jack squeezed her hand gently. "I do, sweetheart. Those were tough times. But we're okay now, right?" "We're more than okay," Jack assured her. "We've got everything we need, and more importantly, we've got people who care about us." They passed the local park where Lily used to play. The old swing set creaked in the gentle breeze, and memories washed over Jack, of countless afternoons watching Lily swing higher and higher, trying to touch the sky with her toes, while he worried about unpaid bills and mounting debts. "Look, Daddy!" Lily pointed to a cluster of wildflowers growing along the fence. "They're like the ones in Walter's garden." Jack smiled, thinking of the old veteran who had become such an important part of their lives. Walter's wisdom had been like water in a desert, appearing just when Jack had needed it most. His simple faith in the goodness of life had helped Jack rediscover his own. They turned onto their street, and Jack felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest at the sight of their house, their home, the place that had almost been lost but was now securely theirs, thanks to Caroline's incredible generosity. The front yard looked better than ever. He'd planted new flowers in the beds, and the grass was thick and green. His handyman's truck, Walter's gift, sat in the driveway, its faded paint wearing its years proudly. "Can we sit on the porch swing for a while?" Lily asked as they approached the house. "It's such a nice evening." "Of course we can." They settled onto the swing, its gentle creaking a comforting sound. Jack had fixed it himself last summer, replacing the old chains and reinforcing the wood. Like so many things in his life now, it was stronger for having been broken and repaired. Lily leaned against his side, humming softly, the hymn she would be singing at the Christmas concert. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, letting the peace of the moment wash over him. The evening air was sweet with the scent of autumn, and somewhere in the distance, a wind chime played its gentle melody. "Daddy? Are you happy?" Jack opened his eyes and looked down at his daughter's upturned face. The question struck him deeply, and he took a moment to really consider it. He thought about where they'd been and where they were now, about the community that had embraced them, about Caroline's friendship, about Walter's wisdom, about his growing business. But mostly, he thought about the little girl beside him who had never lost faith in him, even when he'd lost faith in himself. "Yes, sweetheart," he said softly. "I am happy. Happier than I've been in a long time." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Me too." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Mom would be happy too, I think." Jack felt tears prick at his eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. "You're right, she would be." The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange. Jack watched as the colors slowly deepened, thinking about how far they'd come. He remembered the desperate man he'd been, drowning in pride and fear, unable to accept help even when it was offered with love. Now he understood that strength wasn't about carrying every burden alone. It was about having the courage to let others help you carry them. It was about being part of something bigger than yourself, a community, a family, a story of hope. Lily's breathing had grown steady against his side, and he realized she had dozed off, tired from her exciting day at school. Jack sat there, holding his sleeping daughter, watching the sunset paint the world in glory. The moment felt perfect in its simplicity. Just a father and daughter on their porch swing, safe and loved and home. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the maple tree in their front yard, and Jack thought about how life was like that tree, always changing, always growing, yet remaining steadfast through all seasons. There would be more challenges ahead, he knew, more storms to weather, more obstacles to overcome, but he was no longer afraid of them. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Mercer, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.